Jiu-Jitsu is no longer what it used to be. There's no doubt that Jiu-Jitsu has changed substantially over the years, from lineage to the color of your belt, from the effectiveness of Jiu-Jitsu in MMA, and more. And since we're now in 2024, I think it's time we shine some light on these controversial topics. So let's dive in. The level of black belt is both higher and lower than it used to be. Back in the day, a black belt was a black belt, a monster on the mats with technical precision to destroy almost anyone. But nowadays, when I roll with the black belt, I'm never sure what I'm gonna get. I could get a challenging roll where I need to be on my game, or I can get a pretty easy roll where I barely break a sweat. It's always a toss-up. It's not because of age or injuries either. I can feel and see when technical ability is lacking. This is often due to belts being awarded for time in, rather than their technical ability. But I understand, like, what do you do with someone who's been training 10, 12, 15 years that can't quite hit that next level of technical ability and dominance that used to be expected of a black belt? It is what it is, and I currently have no solution to offer. And on the flip side, good black belts nowadays tend to be better than good black belts of previous generations. It makes sense because Jiu-Jitsu is a young sport and has advanced rapidly through innovation, as well as learning from other grappling-based martial arts such as wrestling, judo, and sambo. So it's a weird thing where the best black belts are now better than ever, yet at the same time, the level of black belt has also been watered down more than ever. Which brings us to our next topic. Belts don't really matter that much. Like I said, when I roll with a black belt, I'm never sure what I'm gonna get. Some blue and purple belts give me a much greater technical challenge than some black belts do. It's not unusual nor unexpected for a competitive purple belt to dominate a recreational black belt. And this is something I experienced as a competitive blue belt. Some black belts, I could get the better of the round, and some black belts would absolutely destroy me. I realized pretty quickly that all a belt does is hold your gi together. And this was reinforced when I was at a Grappling Industries tournament around 2014 or 2015. I saw a competitive blue belt beat a black belt. And the black belt was a good black belt from Brazil, but the blue belt was also good. And to be honest, he was a sandbagger. It comes down to whether you're good at Jiu-Jitsu or you're not, regardless of belt color. And this is especially true with the rise of practitioners who have been training since they were kids. I was doing commentary for a grappling event just this past weekend, where a purple belt who's been training since he was a kid beat two black belts to win the title of ASG Openweight Champion. Those two black belts are both very good at Jiu-Jitsu, but so is the purple belt. I wasn't surprised at all because I knew he was good. And I knew that largely belts don't really matter that much. Like I said, you're either good or you're not. And what if you've been training strictly no-gi? What belt level might you be? And how should belts be awarded in no-gi? Or should they even be awarded at all? I recently rolled with a white belt who's been training for over 15 years. He was definitely black belt level, but he still has to compete as a white belt because he hasn't been graded since he does no-gi only. Quickly, this video is sponsored by X Martial, the best Jiu-Jitsu apparel brand out there. They've mastered the art of blending high performance and sleek designs while combining functionality and style. It's all I wear when I train no-gi. Plus, X Martial's commitment to supporting the Jiu-Jitsu community really sets them apart. They're a brand that supports Jiu-Jitsu athletes and creators, which is pretty rare in this industry. And every piece that they create is a testament to their dedication to quality. So if you're in search of premium no-gi gear, X Martial is your answer. And remember to use my code Jordan10 to get 10% off your order. Lineage is no longer as important as it once was. Back in the day, lineage mattered in Jiu-Jitsu, but now it doesn't matter quite so much. What lineage is who taught you and who taught them, tracing all the way back to the founders of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This was important before a time when effective Jiu-Jitsu techniques were widely available through the click of a mouse. Nowadays, you can have a completely different style and arsenal of techniques than your instructor by learning from those who have a completely different style and arsenal of techniques than your instructor. For example, traditionally the Carlson Gracie lineage meant that you likely had a very pressure-based smashing style of Jiu-Jitsu. Nowadays, you could be under the Carlson Gracie lineage and use a majority of techniques you learned from a more transitional-based flowing style from an online instructor such as myself, as this is very much my style. Another great example is 10th Planet, who are traditionally known for a bit funkier of techniques, many of which rely upon flexibility. You could go to a 10th Planet gym, and instead of having a 10th Planet style, use a majority of techniques you learn from watching Gordon Ryan instructionals. And on the topic of Gordon Ryan, his instructor John Danaher uses and teaches many techniques popularized by Marcelo Garcia. Yet Danaher's instructor Renzo Gracie has a much different style than Marcelo Garcia. So my point is, back in the day, it was much more difficult to learn from a wide variety of sources, and instead, you largely had to rely upon your instructor only as a technical resource. And that's just not how it is anymore. Not only that, but there's also so many black belts who have had falling outs with their original instructor and their lineage is broken. I'm a prime example. I received my blue belt under the Carlson Gracie lineage, but left that gym for a gym that was under the Silvio Bearing lineage, where I received my purple belt, and was no longer under the Silvio Bearing affiliation. I then left that gym to start my own gym and was left without an instructor. I then affiliated with a gym that was 3 hours away and could only train there every couple of months. My new instructor received his blue, purple, and brown under the Carlson Gracie lineage, and then his black belt under the Machado lineage. But that gym no longer has ties with the Machados. So when someone asks me about my lineage, I'm still unsure of how I can really trace my lineage besides who I received my black belt from. And personally, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm a pretty good black belt and received my black belt from a black belt, and that's enough for me. For some, lineage is important to them, and I'm not trying to minimize that. And while it is still very important to receive your belts from a black belt, for the current generation of grapplers, regardless of your official lineage, you're either good or you're not. And more often than not, your style and technical proficiency are less influenced by who your instructor's instructor was and who their instructor was. Jiu-Jitsu isn't as effective in mixed martial arts as it used to be. The UFC was originally created to prove that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the most effective martial art, but now over 30 years later, there's a clear decline in submissions in the UFC. Back in the day, it was much easier to hit submissions, as many fighters being submitted either didn't train Jiu-Jitsu at all or very little. But nowadays, most fighters train everything. Striking, wrestling, Jiu-Jitsu, Sambo. One-dimensional fighters aren't nearly as common. On top of that, anti-jiu-jitsu is being utilized more and more by strikers to keep the fight standing, meaning that rather than engaging with the grappler when taking down, the number one goal for many is just to stand up, Derek Lewis style, which has become a bit of a meme, but it's absolutely an effective strategy against jiu-jitsu. A lot of jiu-jitsu based fighters still haven't mastered the ability to keep the fight on the ground once they've taken the fight to the ground, which can often lead to them gassing out or even pulling guard in a desperate attempt to keep the fight on the ground. Jiu-Jitsu based fighters would be wise to take a page out of Sambo and folk style wrestling to better keep the fight on the ground once they've gotten it to the ground. In these sports, leg rides and wrist rides are heavily emphasized and prioritized to keep the match on the ground, which essentially means that they're controlling and taking away posts to prevent their opponent from building a base and standing up. Whereas in Jiu-Jitsu, we're so used to playing the game, meaning that when we're already on the ground, we'll often stay on the ground, but we don't have to unless we're being controlled properly. Just standing up is becoming a more popular strategy in Jiu-Jitsu, which is why whether you're fighting MMA or competing in Jiu-Jitsu or even just rolling at the club, you need to master the art of keeping your opponent on the ground. This is a skill that I've been working on extensively lately, and a lot of that I've learned from my friend Joe Briza, who is a former D1 wrestler. My ability to do so and my wrestling skills as a whole have skyrocketed ever since I've had the pleasure to learn from Joe while we were filming our Wrestling for Jiu-Jitsu course. And if you want to supercharge your wrestling skills too, then head over to wrestlingforbjj.com and use the code YouTube25 for $25 off the course for the next few days only. So what do you think of my list? I never mean to offend anyone, so if I did, I'm sorry. Alright, thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you're still here, please leave a comment or a fist bump, and we'll see you guys next time.